Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Lorelei Sanders. I'm the State Programs and Budget Management Section Manager. And today I'm going to talk to you about our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, Title I funds allocation distribution process. Next slide. Okay, so the WIO funds come from the U.S. Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration. And each year they issue a TEGL, or a training and employment guidance letter, that tells us the amounts that we're going to receive for each of our programs. So the Title I programs are adult, youth, and dislocated worker. In this TEGL, the funds are broken out by program year and by fiscal year. So the program year runs from July to June each year, and then the fiscal year starts October 1, and then for funding purposes, it ends June 30th of that year as well, to correspond with the program year. So in this TEGL, you would have two amounts for your adult funds. You'll have a PY amount and you'll have a FY amount. For your youth, those funds are only issued through the program year, so you would have a PY amount for youth. And then for dislocated worker, you'll have a PY amount and an FY amount. Typically, USDOL puts this TEGL out in April or May each year. For the following year, that would run from July to June. We are still waiting for our PY26 allocations as of right now. Next. Okay, so when we receive the allocation amounts from USDOL, we use formulas to calculate how much each of the local areas receive. So these formulas are specified in the WIOA law. And for the adult and youth, we are allowed to choose one of two formulas. So you have your regular formula, and then there's a discretionary or alternative allocation formula. And our state has chosen the alternative allocation formula, and that is in our combined state of Alabama workforce development plan. The plan is for 4 years. We did recently turn in the required 2-year modification to that plan. So the next time this would be looked at again on what type of formula we want to use would be in 2 years. Also for dislocated worker, the law specifies certain data that we have to pull and put into that formula, and you can see them listed there. Next slide. Okay, so this is a graphic that is included in the TEGL that USDOL puts out each year, and I thought it was a good visual to show you about the different formulas that can be chose for youth and adult. So if you look on the left, the formula allocation, this is the regular formula, you'll see that it's based on 3 different factors, and each of those factors are 1/3 of the formula. So those factors are areas of substantial unemployment and excess unemployment, and then also disadvantaged adult or youth, depending on the funding source that you're calculating it for. On the right is the discretionary allocation, and this is the one that we have chosen. You'll see that it uses those same three factors, but those 3 factors have been reduced to 70% of the formula. And then it adds 2 other factors that make up 30%. So the 2 that have been added are excess unemployment above the state average, and then excess poverty for adult or youth. Okay, so we have our formula, and then we have to gather the data to put in the formula to do the calculations. So every spring, our labor market information or LMI section here at Workforce provides us data based on their the data that they collect throughout the year, and it's for the fiscal year prior to the program year we're calculating it for. So they provide us for the adult and youth data, they provide us a civilian labor force report and average unemployment levels. In addition to those reports, we also use U.S. Census poverty data by county. Next slide. Okay, so once we get the data together, this is how each one of these factors is calculated. I'm not going to read through each one, but you can see how the factors line up with what was in the graphic of the formula. So one thing I did want to point out here, you'll see that a lot of it is based on unemployment. So the first one, areas of substantial unemployment, that is defined by USDOL and in the law as unemployment above 6.5%. So, a lot of times this is zero for a lot of counties. Everything is broken down by county. And so if the county didn't have unemployment above that 6.5%, then that's just a zero factor for that weight. Also, same thing with the excess unemployment, the level's a little bit lower, but it would be unemployment above 4.5% in that county. And again, that's often zero. So what happens when you have a lot of counties that don't it's like they don't get any credit, so to speak, for those factors. They just get zero that contributes to the overall percentage of funds that they'll receive. Again, you'll see excess unemployment even in the 30%. So that's 1/4 of the 30%. And then we have excess poverty is 3/4 of the 30%. And another thing to think about here, you'll see a lot of this is like excess or above the normal rates. So the way is designed to have the funds flow to the areas that have the most need. Okay, next slide. Okay, so next we're going to talk about our dislocated worker formula. So these are the data sources we collect for our dislocated worker. And you'll see some of the same reports from LMI. We use the civilian labor force and the average unemployment levels. But in addition to that, we also use unemployment insurance beneficiaries, UI exhaustees, and a 30-day mass layoff report that they provide. And again, all this data is broken down by county level. In addition to the LMI sources that we have, we also use the Census of Agriculture that is published by USDA. Slide. Okay. So this table that you see here, this is actually from our state plan, and it tells you each of the allocation factors. There's 6 of them for dislocated worker, and these are the 6 that were laid out by WIOA, and the weight that's assigned to it, and then the sources. So with the dislocated worker data, it's a little more straightforward. We don't have to do as many calculations with it as we do with adult and youth. A lot of times the numbers are just, they give us the numbers by county and we're able to plug that in. We do have to do a calculation on the farm operators change. What we do there is we take the current Census of Agriculture and then we look and see if there's a difference between that and the previous one. And again, that's all reported by county. And then just whatever the change is, if it's more than 0, if there was more farms lost during that last year, then we plug that into the formula. Next slide. Okay. So the way we do the calculations, we actually do them two different ways. Once we get the funds from USDOL, those funding amounts are plugged into a Excel workbook. And then that workbook also has calculations for each one of those factors. The factors, the calculations all come up to one total for the county, and then the counties are all listed into by area. So the region, all the counties for that region are all totaled up, and then that is the weight or the percentage of funding that region will receive. We also have that formula in our accounting database now. We've been using it that way about 2 years or maybe 3. And it runs the calculation as well. We compare the two, make sure the amounts match from each method just to make sure we don't have any errors. Okay, next slide. And this is just a screenshot of our Excel workbook. As you can see, there's a lot of tabs there that do the calculations and then roll up into the PY or FY allocations. You'll see a tab there for keyed data. That is like one tab where all the data from the reports we collect from LMI and other sources is keyed. So we don't have a lot of errors, like having to go into multiple tabs to put that same information in several times. So it's entered on the keyed data tab, and then it flows out to the other tabs. And what you're seeing here on this screen is the roll up into the regions from all the different counties for the different factors. And the indices, that's like the weight they get or the percentage for each factor. Okay, next. Another thing we need to talk about is hold harmless or stop loss. So in the law, it does specify that the workforce regions must receive at least 90% of their share of the previous allocations. And this is just to help the regions, like if the data were to have a big swing, that they don't just, their budget doesn't decrease just at a too fast of a rate where they can't adjust. So one common misconception with this is that the region must receive 90% of their previous funding, but that isn't quite right. It's actually 90% of the percentage they previously received. So what we do is we take the percentage or the weight that they received the 2 previous years, we average that, and then the region has to receive 90% of that. So I have an example here. For 2 previous years, a region had received 20%, like 20% average of the state's dislocated worker funds that were designated for the regions. They have to receive at least 90% of that 20%. And that overall, that comes out to 18% of the new year's funds. Next slide. Okay. And I did want to clarify that the calculations that we've been talking about today are the calculations on how to distribute the funds to the regions. So once the funds come into the state does retain some of the funds. So there's 15% that's kept for the governor's set aside. On top of that, there's 3% that's kept of the dislocated worker funds specifically for rapid response activities. The state is allowed to keep up to 25% of the funds for rapid response activities, but we only keep 3% so that we can put more funds out to the regions. So what that translates into is 85% of the funds that are received from USDOL are distributed out to the 7 workforce regions for adult and youth, and then 82% is distributed out for dislocated worker. So, once we do the calculations, for the state share and the each local area or region's share, we put those amounts out in an administrative directive. The workforce regions then submit a grant agreement, to workforce development using standard funds. Those, grant agreements, they're presented to the state board, and then they are signed, because they're between the region and the state, Alabama Department of Workforce. They are signed by the CLEO and the Workforce Region Board Chair on the region side, and then the Secretary of the Alabama Department of Workforce, um, as, acceptance for the state board and the Alabama Department of Workforce. And these agreements, they contain just overall budgets. They're broken down by program year and fiscal year. And they tell us if any funds will be transferred, but they don't really get into like how the funds will be spent. Okay. Okay, and this is my contact information. If you ever have any questions about the allocations or you need more information, I'd be happy to talk to you. So please feel free to email or call me. Thank you for your attention today, and I look forward to working with all of you on our programs.